Coming up today, no endorsement. Korea's rival parties fail to approve a set of bills meant to boost the economy and better cope with possible terror attacks. Finally, some welcome news for South Korea's indigenous fighter jet program as the United States gives the green light to the transfer of nearly 24 technologies needed for the project to get off the ground. Plus, Korea is expected to get a nice trade boost later this month when its FTAs with New Zealand and China officially take effect. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello to our viewers around the world. It's 6 a.m. on Thursday, December 10th here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Broom. Our top story this morning, the National Assembly's regular session finished with a whimper rather than a bang on Wednesday evening as the nation's rival parties were unable to agree on what to do with a handful of crucial economy and security-related bills. The ruling party has called for an extra session today, but it remains to be seen whether the main opposition will attend. Ji Myung-gil starts us off.
The last regular session of the 19th National Assembly has come to an end. Amid President Park Geun-hye's continued orders to pass contentious bills, rival parties failed to even pass bills that they had previously agreed upon last week.
The agreements that we previously made were not just agreements between the two parties, but they were a promise made to our people.
Both sides of the aisle agreed to pass a bill to promote Korea's service industry, a bill on North Korea's human rights issues, and an anti-terrorism bill for the public safety backed by the ruling Saenuri Party.
The only thing on the president's mind was passing the service sector bill and pressuring us.
The main opposition MPAD is against the Service Promotion Act until a part related to the medical industry is removed due to concerns it could lead to the privatization of the health sector. However, the same fate awaited the opposition bloc's bill to facilitate cooperation between conglomerates and small and medium-sized companies, which failed to earn bipartisan support. As lawmakers need to continue negotiations over crucial bills, the ruling bloc called for opening an extraordinary session on Thursday. But it is unclear whether the opposition camp will decide to participate in the extra session. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
Now, staying with domestic political news, and Korea's rival parties will make another attempt today to try and reach an agreement on redrawing electoral districts ahead of next year's general elections. The chairman and floor leaders of the ruling Saenuri and main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy have agreed to hold discussions to resolve their differences over a number of contentious issues, such as the rules to elect proportional representatives. The move comes as the MPAD called for the meeting on Wednesday to settle the matter by December 15th, and that is a key date as it's when the preliminary candidate registration for the April general elections begins. Leadership from both parties is expected to resume talks focusing on ways to reduce the number of lawmakers elected by proportional representation. Now, police have given the leader of a major Labour union until noon today to hand himself in. Han Sang-gyun is hiding in a Buddhist temple in Seoul, protected by the monks who live there. The chief of police says that if Han hasn't emerged by that time, officers will raid the temple and bring him out themselves. Lee Soo-eun has this report.
The head of the Korean Federation of Trade Unions will have until noon on Thursday to voluntarily leave the Chogaesa temple. Han Sang-gyun has been taking refuge at the Buddhist temple since November 16th after police sought his arrest for allegedly masterminding clashes between officers and protesters in an anti-government demonstration in Seoul last month. Police cannot enter the temple without the permission of the religious authority. On Tuesday, the head of the National Police Agency, Kang Shin-myung, had issued an ultimatum to Han, saying that he will be forced out with a court-issued warrant if he does not turn himself in by 4 p.m. on Wednesday. But Han remained in hiding, prompting police forces to reconnect a demolished bridge that connects the building where Han is hiding with another in order to arrest Han. However, at 5 p.m., Chogesa Temple's Venerable Chasen requested a new deadline.
We will find a solution for this situation by tomorrow at noon.
Police accepted the request and made it clear that if Han does not turn himself in until noon on Thursday, they will immediately enter the temple and make the arrest. Police forces also have not pulled out from the temple in central Seoul in order to prevent Han from attempting an escape during the nighttime. Meanwhile, members of the Korean Federation of Trade Unions have begun an emergency meeting at 9 p.m. on Wednesday to make the final decision about when and how their leader will head out of the temple. Lee Soo-eun, Arirang News.
Now, and some extremely welcome news for the South Korean military. The United States has agreed to transfer 21 technologies deemed crucial in developing Korea's first ever indigenously produced fighter jets. In April, the US State Department rejected 4 other tech transfers, raising concerns it would pull the plug on the rest. But fortunately for Seoul, that wasn't the case. Kim Hyun-bin has this report.
Korea's defense ministry says Washington has agreed to transfer the needed 21 key technologies for developing the KFX project.
Looking at the big picture, the US agreed to transfer the 21 technologies. In addition, specific technologies needed in the future have to go through additional consultations.
A Korean government delegation was in Washington for 3 days, from December 1st, for talks with US defense giant Lockheed Martin to discuss issues surrounding the KFX technology transfers. Korea's defense ministry said the U.S. is well aware of the importance of developing the project, thus vowing to fully support it.
Both Korea and the US acknowledged the strategic importance of the KFX project, and Washington reiterated that it will help out to its maximum extent.
Some experts worry, though, that there might be difficulties in receiving a number of specific sub-technologies needed for the project.
Out of the 21 technologies, there are over 500 sub-technologies, but there is a possibility that we can receive 10 of sub-technologies. If that happens, more time and money is needed, and a hole in our defense will be inevitable.
Korea and Lockheed Martin agreed on the transfer of 25 combat technologies, but the U.S. State Department in April rejected 4 key technology transfers, including the active electronically scanned radar and electro-optical targeting pod, raising concerns it would become difficult to obtain the remaining technologies. The $15 billion fighter jet project aims to develop 120 homegrown mid-tier fighter jets by the mid-2020s. The project is aimed at replacing Korea's aging fleet of F-4s and F-5s that are currently running over their life cycle. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Now, the two Koreas have exchanged their lists of representatives for Friday's high-level governmental talks. The meeting will be the first inter-Korean dialogue of its kind in 8 years. Seoul's Unification Ministry said the South's delegation will be headed by Vice Minister Hwang Bu-gi, along with 2 other working-level officials. Hwang's counterpart from the north will be John Jong-soo, who has long been working for the regime's Reunification Bureau. He represented Pyongyang's ministerial talks from 2003 to 2007. That was just him there. Meeting at the Joint Industrial Complex in Kaesong, the two sides will discuss all outstanding issues on the Korean Peninsula. This will include holding regular reunions for war-separated families and possibly resuming tours to North Korea's Mount Kumgang resort. Now, if you have stocks in Korean firms, you might want to take note of a certain date, December 20th. That's when Korea's FTAs with China, the world's second biggest economy, and New Zealand officially take effect. For more on how Korea is preparing to gain greater access to the gigantic Chinese market, Gwon-swa reports.
The date is set. Korea's FTA with its biggest trade partner, China, is set to go into effect on December 20th. Seoul's Trade Ministry said the agreement came at a meeting in Beijing on Wednesday to speed up the implementation and maximize bilateral benefits. The deal had been inked earlier this year after 14 rounds of negotiations since 2012. According to the ministry, Korean companies are forecast to see swift results given 2 rounds of tariff cuts are due in a short period of time. One this month on the day of the launch and the other on January 1st. On December 20th, almost 960 tariffs will be removed, and eventually the two countries will be eliminating tariffs of over 90% of all goods within the next 20 years. After taking effect, Korea's government expects an additional GDP growth of almost 1%, more than 50,000 new jobs, an increase of almost $15 billion in consumer welfare, which are benefits individuals receive from consumption, and annual financial effects worth $270 billion. But some economists have their doubts.
Effects of tax reductions will clearly show. The problem is the demand for the export items we want to expand have to increase too. But due to China's structural changes, demand's continuously dropping, which means tariff effects won't last long.
That's why experts say the service sector should be targeted, on which new tariff cuts could be discussed within 2 years after the FTA takes effect. So far, Korea's focus has been more on the manufacturing sector. Meanwhile, on the same day, in a separate meeting in Wellington, Korea and New Zealand agreed to roll out their FTA on the 20th as well. And another, the Korea-Vietnam deal, may be added to the list before the year ends. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Now, police in Japan have arrested a Korean national suspected of setting off a bomb at a restroom at the controversial war shrine in Tokyo. The Yasukuni Shrine, which honors around a dozen of Japan's most notorious war criminals, is seen as a symbol of Imperial Japan's militarism before and during World War II. Song Ji-sun reports.
A Korean man suspected of detonating an explosive device at Japan's war shrine last month has been arrested. 27-year-old male surnamed Chun was taken into custody after flying into Tokyo from Korea on Wednesday morning and is being questioned by Japanese police. An explosion was heard coming from inside a restroom at the Yasukuni Shrine on the morning on November 23rd. Police found steel pipes with explosives, batteries, and a timer. No one was injured by the explosion. Chun arrived in Japan 2 days before the incident and was caught on security cameras at the site a day before. He left Japan the day of the incident, but was caught on camera at the shrine carrying a backpack and another bag 30 minutes before the blast. DNA tests on cigarette butts found in the restroom and his hotel room matched. Chun served in the Korean Air Force for 5 years until being discharged earlier this year. Chun is denying allegations, with his mother saying her good-hearted son is not likely to scheme anything that could hurt others. The Korean consul in Tokyo spoke with Chun, but no details have been released as of yet. Korea and China view the Yasukuni Shrine, where millions of Japan's war dead are honored, including Class A war criminals, as a symbol of Japan's past imperialism. Relations with Japan are constantly sour when its leaders, including current Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, visit the shrine. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
The head of the FBI has revealed that the suspects in the recent mass shooting in Southern California were radicalized even before they became engaged. James Comey told the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee on Wednesday that Saeed Razwan Farouk and his wife Tashfeen Malik had been talking about jihad and martyrdom in online conversations dating back to 2013. He also said Malik held extremist views before she arrived in the U.S. last year. The disclosure means the U.S. government's vetting process had apparently failed to detect Malik's radicalization. The FBI chief also said that investigators did not know yet whether their online courtship was arranged by a terror group or developed naturally on its own. 14 people were killed in the shooting at a social services center in San Bernardino on December 2nd. German Chancellor Angela Merkel has become just the 4th woman since 1927 to be named Time magazine's Person of the Year. Speaking on a US news network on Wednesday, Times editor-in-chief Nancy Gibbs said Merkel had helped manage the economic collapse in Greece, being at the forefront of handling Europe's massive refugee influx and coping well with the terror attacks in Europe. Now, the leader of the Islamic State group, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, made it to Time's #2 spot this year, with Gibbs saying he poses a significant challenge to the world. Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump was the 3rd runner-up. Others on the list this year were Russian President Vladimir Putin and Iranian President Hassan Rouhani. Now here's yet another worrying report about global warming. Glaciers on Mount Everest have shrunk by more than a quarter over the past 40 years due to climate change. This is according to a joint report released by the Chinese Academy of Sciences in conjunction with the local university and conservation centre. It says the glaciers have been reduced by 28% compared to measurements taken in the 1970s. The glacial area on the south slope of the world's tallest mountain has decreased by a massive 26% since the 1980s. The shrinking glaciers have resulted in the swelling of many glacial lakes. Well, that's all we have for now. I'm Mark Broom. Thank you, as always, for tuning in to our newscasts, and we'll be back throughout the day with more news bulletins. Until then, goodbye.